I like all kinds of music. Reggaeton, electronic, funk, jazz. Yeah, I love jazz. What about what? Conley got traded to the Utah Jazz. Let me take a look at this trade. Mike Conley Jr. is getting traded to Utah for Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder, Kyle Korver, and draft considerations. So, with these two teams trading, this is a part of the ripple effects of the Warriors' injuries. We'll get into that a little bit later. Memphis is pretty much embracing the rebuild, while Utah is aggressively attacking the ability and potential to be a contender and making sure that they keep that window open. Now, for Utah, what makes this interesting is that while, yes, they got rid of like 3 players, some of them are shooters, and it'll be interesting to see what Utah does in order to, make sure that this offense stays pretty good. Now, Mike Conley as a point guard is definitely going to be able to offset a lot of the offensive responsibilities that fell on Donovan Mitchell's shoulders, much to the detriment of the team not having more offensive hubs in order to properly, be on the defensive, but also be able to score when needed. There was a lot of times, especially against Houston this year, where if they would have had more players that could score or even just hit a shot, because there were just points in time where it was like, Jesus Christ, if I was a Utah fan, I would have been frustrated, but there was a lot of times where their defense could not be enough to bolster the lack of offense that they had. Mike Conley, being the somewhat still star point guard that he is, should be able to definitively take some of that responsibility off of Mitchell's shoulders and help Utah flourish. Now, again, like I said, it'll be interesting to see specifically what they do in order to build a team around these two guys as far as Mitchell and Conley go. And I only say those two guys not to disrespect Rudy Gobert, but he is kind of part of the puzzling equation that Utah still has yet to solve, in the fact that he isn't necessarily able to guard in space. And if he isn't able to guard in space, the moment that he gets put out on the island against a point guard, it's pretty much, as Shaq likes to say, barbecue chicken. And this is something that Utah will most likely address potentially. I'm not sure how they would, but again, if defenses have to focus on Mike Conley, potentially the scoring might be just enough so that any Rudy Gobert lapses against the point guards or other guards or forwards and wings are not as harped upon. So Utah does get immediately better with this, and it's cool to see that no team is going to go to sleep, and this is pretty much what happened when the Warriors got injured. It wasn't just Kevin Durant going down that really led the league to go, hey, we might have a chance. It was Klay Thompson's injury that was pretty key. If someone like Quinn Cook got injured, everybody would be like, okay, whatever, they'll just sign another point guard. There's no disrespect to Quinn Cook. He's a really good backup point guard, but he doesn't have the same ripple effect that 2 stars do, and 2 stars that are congregated on the same team do. So when you take out Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant from the equation, potentially even in free agency as well, other teams in the West are like, all right, it's our time now. So Utah pretty much here is saying that they believe that they have a chance to contend, and they're not going to back away from that. They're not going to shy away from that, and no one is going to lay back and wait for the Warriors to just recharge their batteries if it comes to that. Utah, before this, was kind of in this no man's land, seemingly, where they were just competitive enough to make the playoffs, but they just didn't have enough juice offensively to really do any difference. Mike Conley changes that. So, with that said, how did Memphis do? Memphis gets Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder, Kyle Korver, and some draft considerations. Memphis is finally essentially saying that grit and grind is dead. At some point in time, the zagging does not work anymore, and unfortunately for Memphis, this was pretty apparent as the team unfortunately started to fall apart, not only due to injuries, but due to the fact that their style was becoming very, very outdated in the new modern NBA. Unfortunately, with the modern NBA, you have to have stretch fives, you have to have an offense that is not relying on just 2 guys. You need a lot of ball handlers, a lot of defenders, a lot of shooters, and Memphis was very quickly running out of those. And then they eventually ended up seemingly to say earlier last season, or I guess the past season, basically trading away Marc Gasol. And they almost traded Mike Conley, but then they kind of didn't. And then I guess now they found the package that they wanted. it seems like they could have got more back, but Memphis finally saying that we're going to rebuild and renew means that we're going to get another interesting young team in the West. Not only is now New Orleans probably the more intriguing one with all of the stuff that they got, but now Memphis becomes intriguing because most likely pundits and everyone else seem to expect that Memphis will select Ja Morant with the second pick. That would be their point guard. He'll be paired alongside Jaren Jackson Jr., which will be an interesting duo. And depending on how Grayson Allen may play for them, he as a shooter might be able to help them. Now, Grayson Allen was relegated to the G League for most of his time so far in the NBA. I think that might have been due somewhat to Utah being more of a championship team contending, trying to get to the playoffs. They didn't want to develop him at the time, but some of that can be also lent to the fact that maybe, hey, he just didn't really work that well in what they had, or maybe he's not as necessarily as good as potentially he was seen to be. It all depends on your situation and fit. So maybe Memphis is the perfect fit. And with the new mystery coach that they recently signed, it'll be interesting to see how Memphis approaches its rebuild. So Mike Conley learns some jazz while Memphis gets Crowder and Korver. Now, Korver probably is going to just leave, which is why I didn't really say much about him. I think Korver's just going to be like, all right, I ain't staying around here, because he did it with Cleveland. So most likely he's going to, I think he's an unrestricted free agent. I'm not sure. I have to look at the stats before I do, like, when I edit this. But most likely Kyle Korver's gone. I think Crowder might stay, but he could try to go to a contender. I don't think he's going to try and go to the Lakers, but he might try to go to a contender depending on how free agency shakes out. So I don't know about those two, but I know Grayson Allen is a young player. Memphis is now officially a young team, and they'll most likely retain him, as well as the draft considerations that haven't been detailed yet as of this recording. Mike Conley is now on the Utah Jazz. We can stop talking about it. It feels weird, like all these trades that like were rumored to happen are happening, and it just feels like this weird like confirmation, like, oh yeah, no, we knew that was gonna happen. It's just like, finally, Mike Conley, Jazz, Memphis, Jazz, barbecue. This guy says there might not actually be any Jazz in Utah, but you can put some grits in there. Get it? Because I know I'm amazing.